Hi, and whoa, I don't know what that sound was. Welcome to another episode of Inspiring Honesty. I'm your host, Greg Brahe, and I'm an atheist. We're joined again today by my excellent co-host, Bob Greaves. And I don't know exactly which topic. I have a couple of topics in mind, so I don't know which topic will be the primary focus of this show today. But first, I wanted to invite Bob in and say, how are you doing today, Bob?
Doing pretty good. Doing pretty good. Getting ready for school. Starts up again in a week.
Wow, I know my wife is a teacher herself, and it will be, as I understand it, every day this week at the school. I'm sorry, not Friday, but Monday through Thursday, she will be at the school for at least a half a day. I believe three of them will be full days, and it just caught me off guard. Just suddenly the summer's over, and
Yeah. 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 I even
can't
have other
imagine what
extra things
that's.
to do because like I'm the parliamentarian for the academic council. And so I'll be doing even a special presentation on rules of order and having fun with that too. So I'll be for the
Do
kickoff of
do you
the
use
shared governance
Robert's
committees.
rules?
Hello
Do you
again.
use Robert's rules of order there?
Actually, we use the democratic rules of order for the committees. And they use Robert's Rules of Order for the main the main college. You know, all of the head people there at the college they use Robert's Rules of Order, but actually Democratic Rules of Order are more than sufficient for what all of us are doing.
Yeah, I don't understand rules of order at all. I've tried to even, but they just annoy the crap out
Yeah,
of me. I can't handle
yeah. I've
them. It's
I've
sitting through board
noticed.
meetings or anything. Oh, they drive me
Yes.
crazy when there's these highly structural. Oh, wait. Do we have a second? Like, really, everybody's already talking about this topic, and you're going to go, "Hey, okay, I understand
Yeah.
the value and that it helps to. I think we've even discussed that a bit in the past, but
It is
it's
very difficult to use rules of order with a group that doesn't really understand them. And because, I mean, you can't stop them at every moment, or you can't get anything done. But the truth is, uh, if you follow those rules of order, you can actually get far more done. You really can. But sometimes that's not the point.
Well, and I think that there's something to be said between understanding and also appreciating them. There's certainly people who understand what the rules are, but don't understand why the rules are, or simply philosophically disagree with some of the uses of them. And that I think is a whole nother animal as well. A whole nother. I that's actually one of the things that one of the topics that I wanted to discuss today was the language, things like a whole nother. I don't even remember what that's called, where you insert one word into another one. But I was taken aback earlier this week by a quote that Dr. Jones had quoted of you about the failure to appreciate linguistics, and it was one of the most beautifully concise descriptions of why you and Dr. Jones do what you do, to such a large degree, in focusing on the linguistics um, of the way that people believe. And that
Hmm.
was one of the potential topics that I wanted to discuss today.
Oh,
But I wanted to
yeah.
couch that in something before we go too much into it. The other part of the reason, or the other thing that I want to talk about, was more of a meta topic about what the new covenant group is, and what brings us together, in the fact that you and Dr. Jones can spend so much time focusing on that. And I mean, I had to comment on it that, or there was a person who commented that reflected much of my sentiment, is that great, even if we understood exactly what these people were trying to say and what they were saying, um, it would still just be stuff that was written down by people a long time ago. And it's interesting anthropologically, but it doesn't tell us a darn thing about the existence of any sort of actual supernatural creator, in that respect. But I still very much agree with you that it's an incredibly valuable thing to do. And then you had to come back and blow me out of the water with another comment
Really?
about
Which was
well, actually, your comment was, I believe, back to Blake. Let me see if I can get this one to quote it directly here because it's a pretty short one. It says, I suspect that a more proper understanding of the text would succeed at failing at achieving clarity. It would smother the flames of dogma and help to allow the lack of clarity to be an acknowledged condition. Indeed, people
Yes.
such as Dr. Jones and myself often deal with the problems of the text not so much to solve them, but rather to expose them as real problems, and and some of them may be irresolvable.
Right, exactly. And this is true not just of the text. This is true of many of the differences that human beings have philosophically with each other. They are, in some ways, irresolvable because they rely upon so many different chaotic elements that come together in terms of our what brings us to the beliefs and values that we possess, which are for each of us really unique and individual. Although as a culture we share a great deal of the events that we participate in together, we share in that. But so obviously we're dealing with some of the same realities. But even there, our internal processing of those same realities is in many ways very unique. And so I think that that this forces us to realize we can only go so far with the disagreements that we have with others, and we have to accept that. And I think that that unfortunately, many in the religious sector have this feeling that, oh, you know what? When you study the Greek, now you know what the Bible really says, and now you know exactly what to believe. That's a fantasy. It's just when you understand the language, you begin to discover there's so many possibilities here that at best you can say, now it's possible that Paul was implying this, or that he was saying this, and none of that. But the indexical elements change everything, and we don't know what half of them could even possibly be. For example, let's just use the word run. Do you know what the word run means?
Well, absolutely. There's only one meaning to that word, of course.
If I said, if I were to say, if Susie was to come to the room and say to you, I got to run.
And it means she's about to go sprinting.
What? Hold again?
It means that she's about to go sprinting, correct?
Oh, well, what if as she's saying that, she reaches down to pick up her car keys?
Or to ask for then some nail polish.
Right, as she points to a stocking that has a tear in it and is running down her. I got to run, and she points to it. Now, or she then shows you 4 lotto tickets in a week where she won $1. I got to run. If she were to show you these tickets, or grab the car keys, or if she's jumping around in a jogging suit, or pointing at her stocking, these things that aren't verbally expressed clearly give you the impression that you understand exactly what she's saying. Not only do they give you the impression that you know exactly what she's saying, you don't even stop to think, oh, this word run could mean a lot of different things. It just seems so clear in its context. Well, not to say that when people write things, they tend to write better, realizing that people can't see what they're doing. But they do write things within the cultural context, knowing that there are a great number of things about that culture that people hold in common, that today we don't even know anything about them. And sometimes those are things that people don't even mention or write about, because why? Why write about them? Everybody knows about this stuff. So we do not know the paradigmical context that a lot of these words occur in, and we don't know to what degree these paradigmical contexts radically affect the way some of the words might be used in certain combination. We can pick up on some of them because we find their usages in a manner where we can see what happened before them, what happened after them, the impact it seemed to have, and that gives us a clue because we have various rubrics we can use to determine the linguistic functions going on. But it's when we come back to this ancient text from an ancient day, from a different culture, what we end up doing is we end up discovering a wide variety of possibilities from which it's a good guess.
Hey, it's a good guess. That is a fantastic. I'm just going to quote you on that. That the Bible and translate the best we can do is a good guess. If we
Yeah.
could
No,
just
I
get
mean,
that
there
in
may be
writing, that'd be wonderful.
there may be certain verses here and there where the problems of clarity aren't that difficult. But with that, even there, that's a good guess too.
And I guess I didn't want to focus too much more time on that one today because it's something that I thought was worth mentioning. It was a wonderful point and it was fantastically worded. But it's really something I think that we've spent a fair deal of time going into throughout the various shows that we do on here. So today,
Could I say one more thing
after,
about that though?
yeah,
Just one more thing.
absolutely.
Uh, I'm kind of disappointed that I could say something like that and it would blow anybody away. Honestly, and the reason is this: to me, I think that would be a common understanding that any linguist would have toward an ancient text. But the things that linguists deal with are just not that commonly known. And so as a result, it really does take us by surprise. But to be honest with you, it really isn't all that brilliant. It's kind of like linguistic anthropology 101 applied in some sense. And it's a shame that we have such a tension in the argument of religion that I could say something like that and it could seem so brilliant. That to me, that's a sad state of affairs.
But I think that you've also hit a little bit on why the the Bible and some texts get treated this way and other ones don't as well. Is it's not just the point that you're making, but how you're making it and how people perceive it. In that, as I said, we've dedicated a fair deal of time to having these discussions, but you worded it in such a clear and succinct manner that I believe, was nearly impossible for anybody to read that and not just go, "Oh, I understand
Oh, awesome.
where the
Thanks.
argument is
Yeah.
going." That it was just a beautifully worded statement. It's very very clear and concise. And this does in a way play into or the ending of Clash Course that Joey and I just completed. We were talking about going into an argument whether it's best to go in with a rather vague direction and sort of see where it can lead us and to learn from one another, or to go in. And I think there's value in either side of it. But the other part of the reason it might be seemingly it might be unrelated, but in my mind it makes sense here. Other part of the reason that I wanted to talk about that and the topic that I really wanted to discuss more was more of a I guess a personal meta analysis of what's changed in my life over the last year and how I guess I wanted to pick your brain a bit and somebody who's a little bit more experienced in this realm. Because what I've noticed is since I have become involved with the New Covenant group and have been doing this show and others, and my page on Facebook has grown, and I've I guess
Awesome.
developed a larger network. There has been a rather abrupt shift, I guess, in the questions that I get and the comments that or the things that are posted to my wall. And for the first time in my life, I'm having people that are basically strangers come to me for advice and with
No kidding.
questions,
Yeah.
and often questions that are very difficult to answer or to give such a clear and concise description to. People who ask, how can you be so comfortable with believing that there is no God? And it's like, well, this is something that I wish I
So
could
they're
give
honestly
you in a
asking you
nice little
questions
soundbite.
instead of confronting you.
Right. So people who have had these doubts and have struggled with these issues and have said, I I feel like I'm on the fence or a borderline, or others who are just, that they've been, I guess their eyes have been open that atheists are not bad people and just genuinely want to know more, even if they don't identify with the position. And other than that, I mean, last week's show was a great example when we had somebody comment in that about a friend that had been, I guess, approached by a gay man when we were talking about and it was just,
Yeah, yeah.
it's unique to be in this situation where people are asking questions and seeing things. And I feel like in many of the situations, and I'm going to be very honest with anybody who's going to ever come to me in the future with something like this as well. I'm going to do the best that I can, and I'm often going to wing it. But there's questions that are really really hard to answer sometimes, and I think that there's a great value in not just winging it, but in also trying to establish the things like you wrote in resources. And I think that that's a lot of what the Bible has been for people. The resources sort of compiled in one place that they can go to for many different things that seem like words of wisdom about different topics. And I was wondering, so this is to get to the final, I guess, point of this conversation. I was wondering what kinds of things, or are there any kinds of things that you find yourself leaning towards in telling other people for resources, for books, things that have been influential to you or that you think might be influential to other people, that if we were to sort of create a new canon of any sort, is there anything that you think should be included?
Well, you know, it depends on who the person is asking. For example, if the person is a minister and a believer who is engaged in theology, now this shows my bias, and this bias exists because it was precisely my study of linguistic anthropology that opened my eyes to the foolishness and the absolute bogus character of a typical fundamentalist view concerning the nature and quality of the text, that I would want people who want to believe that this text is significant. I would want them to have a basic understanding in the nature of language. I would want them to study, therefore, certain, I guess there's a book called The Two Horizons that might be useful. I can't, it's been a long time since I even saw
I'm
that
sorry,
book.
your audio is breaking up on me here a bit. What was that book called?
The Two Horizons. It's
Okay.
been a long time since I've read it. I can't even recall who the author was, but basically it's a book about recognizing that when I'm reaching from this culture to that culture, from this paradigm to a context that's a very different paradigm, there's certain problems involved in doing that I might not be aware of before I've done that, and I can't just assume that I know what those problems will be, nor can I assume that I will recognize them when I run into them, because I'm operating from my own paradigm. And one of the things that's true about operating within a paradigm is you find a way of making sense of everything according to your paradigm, so you don't necessarily run into those problems. It's kind of like two people having a total misunderstanding without realizing it. As they're really meaning two different things by their conversation. I would want them to understand more about the nature of language as it applies to the Koine Greek, the Hebrew. I would want them to know more about the history of that language to understand and appreciate the problems we actually have in knowing what that language is and what the how to deal with it and how to work with it, and they don't. So I would want them to have more of a linguist. Most people try to learn the biblical languages by just trying to compare dictionaries. They want to know the meaning and definition of this word, and they know meanings and definitions of words in English, and they just want to make they just want to do some code switching here that is somehow direct. That's totally false. So people who want to deal with the text, I would want them to get more of a solid understanding of the nature of texts themselves, rather than just operate on the assumptions. But in terms of people who aren't necessarily ministers or theists who are going to be, really centered in the text, I think I'd want people to just think more about what is love, and how does this work out? I mean, think about it. I can't tell you how long I was a Christian, and it never occurred to me to question God's leaving Adam and Eve in the garden, so vulnerable, so naive, so unprepared, that today I'm thinking of that babysitter who's sitting out there in the living room texting to other people while watching a soap opera when she's babysitting the kids, and she has no clue the baby's fallen into the pool and is drowning. It's so neglectful. And I can't tell how long I was a Christian. It never occurred to me that this story about what happens in the garden. Now I perceive that text as really being some sort of a parable. So the point isn't the neglect of God, But if we're to believe that's literal, that's a horrible thing for a God. He's neglecting them. He's putting them in this horrible situation on their own, and supposedly, according to the story that these people want to tell us, and the results and consequences of the danger they face is going to be that they and their children face the danger of eternal hell as a result of that. Is a horrible, Father. But I can't tell you how long I was in faith before that question even occurs to me. So I would want people to really think about what is love, and are we facing this text as if this text possesses a consistent, bona fide, credible way of telling us what love is?
Well, the part of the thing that brought this up is I'm gonna grab something off my bookshelf here real quick.
And while you're doing that, I'm going to hum.
I have a book here. It's called The Good Book. This is a humanist Bible that's put together by A.C. Grayling, who is a British philosopher, I believe, is his background. And I think that, frankly, I don't mean to discount what Dr. Jones is working on, because I think that it is a very, very worthwhile endeavor. But I think that there's something different that I would love to undertake as a project, or sort of approach as a group, even with many, many people. I think that's the only real way to do it. I've noticed that in the Bibles that, say, the Gideons give out, or many other ones, they have sort of a list of questions, issues, concerns that people face in their day-to-day life, struggles that people go through, and then some resources. They have, in this situation, scriptural references, and if you're having a hard time with the death of a loved one, try reading this part. Or if you're having a hard time with
these people weren't complete idiots. They suffered all sorts of horrible things, and they had to deal with them. And a lot of the horrible things in the Bible are things that at the time, the cultures that were writing these things, they weren't perceived as that horrible. And so it's not surprising that there'd be some wonderful, calming verses that one could read at such times. People have been dying.
And
since,
me being the secularist that I am, I look at things like this and I say there has to be a way that, because the most frequent argument that people pose against atheists is that we don't recognize the good that church does, or that religious belief does, and I do. In many ways recognize that there are benefits to people, but I have had this nagging feeling that, based on several things that I've read in the last couple of days, and it's been going on actually for a long time, but it sort of really bubbled up in the last few days, that there's got to be more that we can do, because I really think that a lot of this dogmatic adherence to the text as the inspired or the literal word of God is to give people hope and to give them comfort and to help them in times of despair and of distraction. And frankly, the the thing that really sort of tipped me over the edge today is I read a quote this morning by Viktor Frankl, that it's from the book Man's Search for Meaning. I'm going to read
Yeah.
it on air here because it reduced me to tears this morning reading this. It is something that I, as an atheist, have struggled with, and this is I was frank in the person who just asked me about, how can you be so comfortable as an atheist, and I said that there's, it's not all, I guess, honey and roses or whatever the terminology is. There's
Mhm.
some sincere existential issues that come along with not believing in any sort of afterlife, and death is one issue that a lot of atheists struggle with. Not so much their own, but often loss of loved ones. This one, it hit me. It says, once an elderly general practitioner consulted me because of his severe depression. He could not overcome the loss of his wife, who had died 2 years before, and whom he had loved above all else. Now, how can I help him? What should I tell him? Well, I refrained from telling him anything, but instead confronted him with a question. What would have happened, doctor, if you had died first, and your wife would have had to survive you? Oh, he said, for her this would have been terrible. How she would have suffered. Whereupon I replied, you see, doctor, such a suffering has been spared her, and it was you who have spared her this suffering, to be sure, at the price that now you have to survive and mourn her. He said no word, but shook my hand and calmly left my office. In some way, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds meaning, such as the meaning of a sacrifice.
Mhm.
That quote just it floored me. It was, I mean, again, we could pick it apart, we could criticize it. There's things that it might be insensitive in some ways, and it might not apply to all situations, but it was a beautiful and entirely non magical approach to
Right.
answering that
And
question.
it speaks to the logotherapy that Viktor Frankl would be the proponent of, in that, you know, you may not be able to control what's happening. You may not be able to control the conditions and circumstances that you are in, but you can decide and choose how you will see them and how you will respond to them. And consequently, that being a power you do have, one can find meaning in doing that, you know? And
So I guess what that made me think of, along with the things that you had written, and the fact people have been asking me these deep existential questions, and other general questions that are not so deep, but about, general daily life, and how do I approach this situation. It seems to me that, one, the Bible is not sufficient. I think that should be clear to everybody, unless you are a very, 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 very devout believer in the Bible. There is far more that could be said on many of these subjects, and could be said in the nature that your quote was, a very succinct and meaningful and clear, in that it conveys a message without going on for 100 pages and saying, well, if this is hard for you right now or struggling, you need to read this book or watch this lecture series, or there's a real value in having these short stories and these parables and things like that, which much of the Bible does contain, but also without having the the bad things that are in the. I mean, what value is there to the story of Jephthah burning his or offering his daughter as a burnt sacrifice, or
you're
Elisha
asking a you're asking a
sending a
question
she
very
bear to tear
similar.
apart 42 children? Uh, I,
Yeah.
I
Aren't you asking
really.
a question very similar to the question that Frankel was asked? And that is, don't you think there is benefit in knowing that this is the kind of thinking that at one time actually made sense to mankind? And it helps us see the trajectory we're on. But I think it also helps us, if we're going to be honest about it, the kind of blindness we as human beings can have. And it might suggest to us the possibility that, maybe we haven't arrived yet either. It's quite possible 2,000 years from now that people will be talking about the way we talk now, and they'll talk about how outrageously unloving we were. We go to wars. We have gridlock in Congress over stupidity. And and talking about the way we treat other human beings, and problems with healthcare and what have you. It's quite possible 2,000 years from now, if we're still around, that people will find us to be quite barbaric and primitive. And so I do think that there's some value in recognizing that this is part of where we're coming from.
I don't disagree, but I think that that's more of a general sort of well-rounded scope. That yes, that there is a true and real value to that. But I guess I'm looking at it more on the immediate, practical, applicable value. I just the major point I guess I've been driving at here is that I think we spend a whole lot of time talking about the Bible and what it really said, and the things that are contained in it, and we miss the opportunity to talk about the things that are written now in our native languages by native or speakers of our native language, that we will have a much greater ability to understand the meaning of, that can help answer the same questions and can help to motivate us in the same way. I mean, we have the book of Psalms is a book of poetry, but we have literally millions of books of poetry that have been published in the English language within the last century. And I think
Sure.
that's not something that is a negligible fact. I really, when I read that quote this morning, all I could say was, I can't believe that I've never come across that before. It's in all of the times I've contemplated this question and discussed this topic, it's just one that has eluded me, and I feel that it's a quote that is short enough and succinct enough that it should truly be cataloged in some sort of canon, a book,
Mm.
and not a canon that is a dogmatic one, but in a referential form that we can say, listen, if you're struggling with this, here is a collection of stories, quotes, poetry, songs, and other media that may, even a visual art that may help you through this process. And
Sure. Yeah.
I feel that we often miss the now because we're spending so much time focusing about the past.
Yeah, there's a lot of books that ought to be on a good idea to read list. Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning is definitely one of them. Even things like The Road Less Traveled, probably be a good book for a lot of people to read.
I feel like we
You
should
know,
work on putting together a list.
well,
That's something
I
that
meant,
I'm going to ask viewers to send in your ideas. I'd love to have this as a
yeah,
resource of some sort that we can cloud or crowdsource this one. Crowdsource. Come on.
I would rather than coming up with a list, though, I would recommend that people read books they've been told not to. I would recommend they read books that they've been that were recommended by people they genuinely admire, and then look for your own gold mines as well, and to reduce it to a list. It's good to know that there are some recommended books out there, but uh, if we're going to move forward, we want to actually move beyond the things that have actually been written.
I think that you're right in any way reducing something to a list or making any sort of definition or canon is, of course, leaving out a huge wealth of other things that are out there and getting things. But that's why I read a book while I was on vacation that was or A Short History of Nearly Everything by Bill Bryce, and I've read it before, but it's a great book. Reread that, and the greatest resource of that book, beyond just the way that everything is put together and worded, is the incredibly detailed bibliography that he put together in the
Wow.
back. I mean, I can flip that open and see huge amounts of further reading, and that's certainly something
Yeah.
that is
Bibliographies are
not to
awesome.
be.
Really. By the way, I know a version of the Bible that I think you'd enjoy reading.
Wait, what is it? I'll have to write this down.
The Boomer Bible.
I think you've mentioned that before.
Yeah, Boomer. Look it up and read that.
I will have to do that because yeah, that you've mentioned that before, and I've not had the opportunity. So,
Yeah,
does it have a
and
good
I won't say anything
bibliography?
more about it. I won't say anything more about it, but you just
Oh,
pick it up and read it.
that's another question, of course, that the fans of the New Covenant group, or even the criticizers, the critics of the New
Critics.
Covenant group, very frequently bring up is we're all about telling people that there's problems with the Bible that they're reading, but very hesitant to say like, well, if you want one that's better or the best the current model that we have, or the ones that handle these the most judiciously, even if not perfect, are these ones. Do you want to commit to anything on that one? What ones would you actually recommend?
Oh, versions of the Bible.
Right, other
I
than
mean,
of course Boomer's Bible for me.
uh, I uh, I've I've gone on record, I think, as saying that I think that the current translations that are popular go from bad to worse. I mean, they're not entirely misleading, but the problem is that to this point in history, most of the translations that have come our way from individuals and committees that have a great deal invested in maintaining and sustaining and protecting their theology. And so they will not translate it in a manner where they really ask questions such as, what does this really mean? What is really being said here? And giving it the freedom to possibly mean or say something that is radically opposed to what they've been believing. And so the honest translation of a document requires a certain scholarly commitment to saying, I don't care what this does to my faith or my personal perspectives. I want to see if I can be as. And by the way, nobody can achieve that entirely, but at least they can really put forth that effort, And this is why I really think that there's there's not too many. I mean, so I use a variety of translations myself to just see what's been done, but I really feel that we need to bring a far more mature linguistics into biblical translation before we're ever going to come up with something in English that really begins to do some things justice. And when that comes out, it's going to be demonized and hated, and everyone's going to be warned about all of its shortcomings. So um,
So you don't think that
that's
there's a current extant model or translation of the Bible that is even the best, or the one that you would recommend for
I think
somebody who doesn't have the time to learn all these linguistic terms
well
and nuances, who just wants to get the greatest understanding that they can currently?
well if you read the New American Standard Bible to try to get a more radically literal sense, if you want to read the NIV and read something that at least has a little more of a flow, you can at least get the gist of what some things are. But I would recommend, okay, take the things that are being said, find a way of saying this with less charged, less dramatic language, and take out all the hyperbole, and consider if that's possibly what's really being said here. And you're probably going to be on track. But in the end, as you were saying, earlier, uh, you know, you're going to get a lot of good stuff out of Viktor Frankl, and so don't waste all your time trying to find answers in the Bible. There's plenty of good things in there, but there's plenty of good things all around if you're going to embrace honesty, if you're going to embrace love, if you're going to embrace people, if you're going to embrace the value that you and others have. um, it's it the text isn't that important.
I have to agree on that note, of
Yeah.
course. But so then I guess my last question is for you personally. Have there been any other texts or authors or any other? I mean, you're a musician, so I'm sure there have been artists that have been very influential for you and have helped you in your search for meaning and things of and struggling with these questions. Things that you could
Well,
recommend to people. What's been important to you?
Bob Dylan as a lyricist has spoken to me in a sense. But to be honest with you, my as much as I love music, I have never. I have been more in love with the music than I have been involved with the personalities. So, I'm a huge Beatles fan, but when people quote John Lennon, I, you know, John Lennon wasn't a stupid guy. I think he was, in many ways, quite brilliant. But the way he somehow, he didn't really pay enough attention to Julian, and yet he wrote you all we need is love. But I don't condemn him for that. I just think it demonstrates that, well, John Lennon was as lost as the rest of us are when it comes to trying to be good and consistent, and he really wanted to be, and what have you. So, I guess I don't regard musicians as possessing some sort of inside corner on the truth any more than anyone else, and they all struggle with it. So, no, the truth is, I haven't been really wildly influenced by that. Probably more influenced by people like C.S. Lewis got me thinking. Helmut Tillich got me questioning different ways of seeking to find meaning in the text or purpose and intent. Uh, uh, Ferdinand de Saussure got me realizing that my typical and assumptions about language were all wrong. you know, uh, so there've been a lot of people who are, I'd say, more in the more academically oriented people were the people who had an influence on me and that kind of thing, not musicians.
How about novels?
Novels. Um, I loved C.S. Lewis. Thought it was great. I loved Charles Dickens. Thought he knew how to tell a story. Um, I read Dan Brown's stories, a couple of them, loved them, But I'm not a big fiction reader. But there's a lot of great books out there that I enjoyed reading The Shack. I thought it was great the way.
I haven't had
Um,
the chance to read that one yet. I've heard a lot of people talk about that as been this like paradigm shifting book about the sort of or it really helped open their religious beliefs, and
yeah, and it
therefore I feel like I
approached the whole.
should read it. But
Yeah, Paul Young reaches out in a very different way. He tries to deal with these questions more relationally than and not dogmatic, and there's some great lines in that book, like yeah, so are you saying, like there's one place in there where I think in the book where it says, so are you saying that all paths lead to God? And Jesus answers back saying, most paths don't go anywhere, but I'll travel any road to find you, or something like that. So it's a totally, it's a paradigm shifting kind of book that I think is meaningful and useful. But, the truth is when we read, we should talk to people who have philosophies we don't like, who seem to be genuinely and passionate about, as long as they're decent people. And the reason we should do that is because there is a real reason why there are people who are genuine, sincere, and passionate about things you don't believe in. And
it's
and
because they've been
and
deceived by
not
the trickster.
what's that again?
It's because they've been deceived by the trickster.
It could be, but I'll tell you what. One thing I think is very important that the New Covenant group is doing. I believe that all people love the straw man. And I believe that all people drift toward the straw man. And I think that we all turn the people we disagree with into straw men. And by having dialogue, we discover something. I'll tell you what, sometimes I hear atheists say things when they're criticizing the Bible. And not that I'm going to be defending the Bible, but sometimes the things they say indicate to me they really don't understand what they're criticizing. And when I hear that, it makes me realize when I'm criticizing the atheist, he's probably listening to me saying, that guy don't have a clue what he's talking about. He doesn't know where we're really coming from. And so I think being in dialogue with people who really do have different conclusions and being face to face with them helps us to understand how it's possible that a good, decent, intelligent human being can actually see things differently, even if they don't persuade us. We come away with a realization that the conundrum of philosophy is not as easily solved as we thought it might be.
That's really the only we're running out of time today, so I don't want to go into any new topic. But the only thing that I really wanted to discuss today was I guess the overarching concept we have been talking. I mean, I know in my personal experience, novels have been more influential to me in many ways than nonfiction. But at the same time, nonfiction has been more influential than novels in many other ways. I mean, I absolutely love the shelf full of nonfiction written by philosophers and scholars about a lot of these questions specifically, but then also I have, I mean, I guess because it was very contemporary for me, or because it was that great of a series, that the Harry Potter series was an excellent,
tremendous.
It actually it ignited a passion for reading in me as well, and that I think is a worthy thing, if nothing else. But it just, I thought it was one of the most compelling stories written in our day, and I think that there's
Well
music,
written
there's
and
songs,
life
there's
lessons in
quotes,
there.
there's all of these things that get so overlooked. Actually, there's a song by Tim Minchin. Again, I love going back to him. That
He's
it's
awesome.
called "The Good Book." I mean, the general refrain. It's a little bit of a hillbilly tilt to it, but it's I only read one book, but it's a good book, don't you know? I only need one book or good book because the good book, or I know that it's a good book because the good book tells me so. I don't remember exactly, but you know, there's so much out there that we miss if we focus so directly on one thing and one thing only, that I really feel
Right.
that every organization should have sort of a bucket list for that they've put together, and it shouldn't agree across the board, but something like a top 100
No.
things that you should read or listen to or see before you die. And this
Yeah.
show to me was just a introduction of that topic, and I would love if the fans and anybody else out there, viewers, would start to send in their ideas for it. And I think that this might be a great topic for the Cult of Honesty this coming Wednesday as well. Things,
Sure.
just books, stories, things that have changed your life. So I may
Real
be
briefly,
indulging myself
real
a little
real
bit too much
briefly.
there.
I went to Bob Jones University. I didn't go there for a full 4 years, but I went there, and it was one of the most uplifting things I could have ever done. Was when I started reading all the books that were on their "Do Not Read This" list. It was awesome.
I can't believe anybody has a "do not read this" list. For the record, that's
Well, sort of, yeah.
crazy talk to me. But um, I, yeah, the best way to get a book read though is to ban it, right?
Yeah. Well, actually, they
Or
didn't have a
to lie to
list, but there were
Oprah
people the
about it.
people in books that they were very severely critical of, And so I started reading them and thought, this is awesome stuff, you know. Uh,
Well, that is all we have for today's show. I have no idea yet what next week's Inspiring Honesty will be about, but I look forward to it anyway. And invite our viewers today to stick around after this show for the Unconventional Pastor and the Place coming up at 8 o'clock. And then, of course, to join us for the Cult of Honesty and the Unconventional Pastor and I think we that's the only two shows we do on Wednesdays now, right?
As
Your
far as I'm
show
aware,
and
yeah.
okay, and then of course all day next Sunday, come back again for
Yeah.
the meeting of the minds, for Clash Course, for What Would Love Do, for as so many different shows that we offer, and of course, inspiring honesty. Join us again next week. Have a good one.